Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. This is the Midweek debate. We're back after a week off. My name is Steven Railston and I'm joined by my co-host Tyrone Marshall. Ty, I was away for Cheltenham, which is why the podcast was postponed. You still did one with Samuel, I believe. Did you have a good week? Did you have a bit on Cheltenham? I know you weren't off work, but...
No, not really. It's not quite the same when you're not there, is it? It's, I've been a couple of times and it is a phenomenal day out, isn't it? Although it sounds like Benidorm's the place to be in Cheltenham week now. That seems to be really catching on.
Some of my friends were across in Benidorm, but if you get offered to go down, you have to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you paid a lot for your Cheltenham tickets, Stephen.
It was complimentary in the end, but what an experience to go down there. It was the third time I've been on the opening day, but we were just talking before we came on air about Constitution Hill.
Yeah.
If you don't know horse racing, he was supposed to be the greatest horse of all time over hurdles, and he fell. So that probably says it all, doesn't it? It set the tone for the weekend.
Yeah.
I think you said I would probably be selling my coat by the end of the week.
Yeah, I can't see your coat here, actually.
Well,
so,
it was actually my shoes that I sold, not my coat.
Fair enough. I wonder why you're wearing your socks.
Left my coat at home. Right, we'll get straight into it. You probably know the drill by now. We do like to focus in on a topic in the first part of this podcast and then have a bit more of a chit-chat in the second part. So today we're going to discuss the ticket situation at Manchester United. This all started a couple of months ago, really, when Premier League tickets were increased to £66. So Jim Ratcliffe flagged a lot of cop for that and got a lot of stick. And now season ticket prices have been announced for next season. Ty, there's going to be a 5% increase for the majority of fans at Old Trafford. Under 16 prices have been frozen. That's great to see. However, pensioner concessions have been reduced from 50% to 25%. Now, slight caveat, the club have kind of argued that not everyone at that age was getting that concession. However, from what I've seen on social media, and we've had a lot of emails into the Manchester Evening News, a lot of complaints, it does seem like a lot of people had that concession. And those pensioners, the people who have been going to Old Trafford for the longest, the senior individuals, they're going to be hit the hardest by these changes. And for me, that doesn't make much sense.
Well, no, it doesn't make much sense. I think it's a couple of thousand that are affected, maybe. And no, it doesn't make any sense for us, but I'll tell you who it makes sense to. And that's a businessman looking at it saying, why are some paying this and some paying that? Let's reduce it and they should all get the 25% rate. And that is what Ratcliffe is. It's a business decision, treating these people as customers rather than fans. And, I think Ratcliffe is clearly treating this as a business like any other. He's treating Manchester United like Ineos. Manchester United is part of the Ineos empire now. It's not just Manchester United Football Club. It's Manchester United run by Ineos. And it will have to adhere to the same Ineos principles of doing things on a budget and cutbacks and being treated like a business. And if Ratcliffe is looking at that and not seeing the human side or the fan side, he's seeing that these senior rates are getting different level of discounts. We should bring it all down. But at the end of the day, it's pricing fans who've been going for years out. And it's obviously, it's an appalling decision. I don't think there's any getting away from the fact it's an appalling decision. And if he was running this like a football club rather than a business, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't be made.
That's what it boils down to. And all the decisions that he's made since he's taken over football operations have been based on that, haven't it? It's been business decisions, not based on football decisions for football fans. He's looked at it very coldly, very brutally.
Yeah, totally. And it's clearly, and this, you see so many times people come in, successful businessmen come in and run a football club like any other business. And it is not any other business. And Ratcliffe will say, right, well, we'll reduce these. People, hundreds are probably going to give up season tickets now because they can't afford them. someone else will fill their seat, or even better, which I think is probably what's going to happen, we won't sell loads of season tickets
and that's
anymore.
probably what they want, though, is it not?
Clubs don't want season ticket holders anymore.
It's quite a big accusation, isn't it? And I'm not saying it's completely true, but that's what it feels like, doesn't it? For fans, that's what they're arguing. It feels like they just want loyal fans from the area who are local, who attend lots of games, to be replaced by tourists. And look, there's nothing wrong with having people who come abroad and they spend a fortune to come to Old Trafford from afar around the world. But your core support is your local support, and they are the bedrock of the club.
Yeah, I don't think, but certainly the big Premier League clubs, you've seen it at City. I don't think City have issued a new season ticket in 5 years. And these clubs just don't want season ticket holders. And if a couple of hundred do give up their season tickets, guarantee you those seats will be sold on general sale, and it'll go from a season ticket where the discount, where it might be working out at £40 a game, to being sold on a match ticket where you might get 60, 70 quid a game. And that's what clubs want, I think. Season tickets are discounted. You know, they've always been discounted rates. It's that reward for loyalty, that reward for attending every game. And I just think clubs don't want them anymore. And I imagine Ratcliffe doesn't want them anymore, because United, even if there was no season tickets, United would probably still sell out every week. And I don't think he cares who is in that stadium or not.
I've seen some people maybe not be as bothered by it because if it doesn't affect you. So if your ticket's only going up by 5%, the human instincts to think, well, I could probably stomach that. I can still make it work financially. Inevitably, there will be some people that 5% might even be too much in this current climate.
It's 5% after 5% last year and 5% the year before.
3 consecutive rises, wasn't it? And I think it was frozen for what, 10 years?
11 years.
Yeah, so around that. So it's been tough to take because the last couple of years, it has just kept on going up. But this is a kind of thing where you have to kind of unify among you as fans, I think, because if it happens to them, it affects fan culture and it's an attack on fan culture, and eventually it will affect you. It has a kind of all-encompassing effect on everyone, really. And again, going back to the senior supporters, they will argue the case that they have been Old Trafford for the longest. They've been there for decades. They've paid the most, and they should be rewarded for that loyalty over the years. And they should.
Yeah, absolutely they should. They've been going the longest. There's a good piece that our colleague James Docker's done in the Telegraph this morning, speaking to a lot of them that have been affected, and some of their stories of going to the games over years are incredible, really. And it's, you know, it is just appalling, I think. And, you know, I mean, it kind of sums up that United have got themselves in this position where the same category of people are getting different discount rates. But once it's there, you know, wait for them to give up their season ticket or stop using their season ticket, and then you do away with it. To do it now, and, you know, it's putting season ticket prices up by £200 for some senior citizens, and it's
that's a sensible
fortune.
solution. I mean, everyone does a lot of talking about giving solutions, but you're right. If you say, so everyone who's currently got a senior season ticket that gets the pensioner concession, right, you're locked in on that. And from now on, if you're going to get senior concessions going forward, the people who are just turning 65, for example, this is the price.
This is the discount,
they were aware.
yeah.
But to put that price increase on people who are already paying, and you're right, it could be up to £300, £250.
Yeah.
I've seen the emails. That's a lot of money in 1 year. It's a lot of money, that.
It is, yeah. It's another one of these situations where, you know, a lot of people have watched Gary Neville's interview with Ratcliffe last week, one of the few friendly media organisations to be offered an interview with him. And he said in there, Neville made the sensible point of, instead of getting rid of the 40 grand to the Ex-Players Association, do a dinner, have Fernandes and Maguire turn up. That is such a simple solution. That's hardly genius from Gary Neville. I think everyone could have thought of that. And Ratcliffe sits there and goes, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Oh yeah, oh no one mentioned that to me. Like, flipping heck, seriously? But if he, because he doesn't think about it. He doesn't think about the ex-players. He doesn't care about the ex-players. He looks at the numbers on a spreadsheet. And if you sat him in a room now with some of these senior citizens who can't afford it, and they told him their stories, he'd probably be like, oh yeah, I didn't really think of that. He just sees the numbers. He doesn't see the human side.
So can we accept that when he bought the club and he said, look, we're going to put the Manchester back into Manchester United. I'm from Failsworth. I'm a local lad. Are we going to, I mean, we already accepted it, but this is just the factual, it was a load of crap.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
There's no way to say it, isn't it? It was a load of rubbish.
Yeah, it was. And there's no, you know, even just getting off the general season ticket price rises, this has been the worst United season in years and years and years. And now you're saying,
said that we were discussing the prices.
And now you're saying, here's another 5% on top of your season tickets to watch, you know, and maybe next year it'll be better. You know, there's positive signs recently, but I just think it's ridiculous. And these clubs make so much money. This is a relative drop in the ocean, really. And I think, I think it's about more than just an extra 5% on season tickets will raise us a bit of money for every season. I think it's trying to drive season ticket holders out of having season tickets. And I don't think United are alone with doing that. But I think that is fundamentally what it's all about, that you can sell. We saw it with the £66 thing for the unsold tickets this season. That is what clubs want to do now. They want to sell every ticket at a very high price. And I think it's a sign of things to come with the new stadium as well. I think there's going to be some exorbitant prices there. And it's a real fine line, because it is making going to football unaffordable for, I don't want to get classist about it, but it used to be called the working man's game. And it's not just the working man's game. It's a game for everyone. But traditionally, it was people that would do half a day on a Saturday and then go to the game. These people can't afford it anymore. Probably a majority of people living in Greater Manchester cannot afford to go and watch Manchester United at these prices. And there is going to be a knock-on effect to that. You talked about fan culture before. I mean, the away end on Sunday was absolutely brilliant. Probably the best away end of the season. But bit by bit...
Sociedad the week before away in Spain, there was a lot of complaints about the away end then. So it is having its effect.
Bit by bit, it's going to drive out. And that's another thing with the tickets, the redundancies. I know it's kind of a separate issue, but taking away that staff member that went to away games in Europe to hand out tickets, it's going to become, we've not really seen it yet, but it's going to become a situation where people are buying tickets for credits and either trying to sell them, or if they can't sell them, just not going, because no one's there to check now that they're going and collecting their tickets. And, you call it an attack on fan culture, and I think it's a good phrase. It's exactly that.
Must released a statement a couple of weeks ago when the final... the figures, for the last few months of 2024 were released. And they kind of got into the figures quite deeply. And they concluded that the £66 charge in the Premier League was raising less than £2 million. Obviously, season tickets will have raised more than that because there's more of them. And it's more of an increase, obviously, than whatever it was to £66. But it's still relatively a drop in the ocean compared to player wages, transfers. And this is the most frustrating thing for me, when you look at all these little decisions that Ratcliffe has made. They might be all right in isolation because they're relatively small, but it's death by 1,000 cuts. They all add up.
Yeah.
And they're not actually, they're just a drop in the ocean, aren't they? When you look at Anthony, the money he's spent on these players, and obviously you could turn around and argue, well, it wasn't done under my watch. But extending Ten Hag's contract, sacking Dan Ashworth, that cost, what, £12 million was the figure, 14? These decisions are indefensible, really. And it really grates with me, that.
Yeah, totally. And, it's a terrible look when, on Sunday or in Sunday's papers, Ratcliffe is singing the Glazers' praises. There's no other word for it, calling them the nicest people on earth. It's just absolutely beggars belief.
Do you think he's doing that because he's signed documents and he's trying to maintain a relationship?
He signed documents to not criticise them. He's not signed documents that say you have to call us the nicest people on earth. Just don't get into it. And the fact he got into it, he's clearly telling people what he feels. He likes the Glazers. There's no getting away from that. And I know that it is difficult for him to say the cause of all these problems are the debt, but he's argued the opposite. That the debt is not that big a problem. And it clearly is. And, the saying from the fans groups now is your debt, not ours. But it's not the case. This debt is being put on in supporters. And it was inevitable it was going to happen.
Though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It is. Regular working class people being made to pay for decisions of multimillionaires.
Yeah, totally. And, so much of this is, I put it in a piece around the redundancies, but, you mentioned Ashworth and Ten Hag before, and Ratcliffe's basically saying, they were mistakes, like £14 million mistakes. It's like, sorry guys, we've paused up again on the football side, so we have to sack some cooks and cleaners, and sorry, your tickets are going up. Just own your mistakes. You messed up. You put some more money in. The Glazers put some more money in. And I just think the club, it's the soul is being stripped from the club. And, I spoke to a United staffer who left at the end of last year, earlier this week, and they didn't have a good word to say about Ineos. No one at Manchester United likes them and the way they're doing things. And the fans don't like what's going on. And you give Ratcliffe credit for fronting up and doing those interviews. At least the stadium is clearly showing the kind of ambition that the Glazers never did. But it's okay producing that kind of glossy image, and this is what we want to do. You've got to fund it now.
I was about to say, the question is, where's the funding?
Funding coming from? And that's exempt from PSR. For Glazers and Ratcliffe, if the stadium's going to be such a lucrative gold mine, then the Glazers and Ratcliffe could easily put £1 billion in and get it done. They ain't putting a penny in.
Brentford, Liverpool, West Ham and Tottenham have frozen their season ticket prices. I'd kind of remove Tottenham from that list because their season ticket prices are the most in the Premier League, so freezing them isn't exactly something to be praised for. But fair play to the three other clubs. And obviously we don't give Liverpool much praise on this podcast. But across, not far, 20 miles away, 30 miles away, another working class city. Yeah. They've got more in common with Manchester than Mancunians or Scousers would like to admit. And they've frozen season ticket prices. United should have followed their lead and done the same, really. They're going after the wrong revenue stream, aren't they? There are other ways to raise this cash. And as you said, unfortunately, with this new stadium being introduced last week and revealed, it just seems inevitable that these season ticket prices in the new stadium will cost a fortune.
Yeah, fans are going to end up paying for that new stadium. I don't, with Ineos and the Glazers running the club, I don't think there's any doubt fans are going to end up paying for that new stadium. How it gets funded is going to be interesting because United are adamant it won't affect the transfer budget. I mean,
it did for Arsenal, didn't it?
It did for Arsenal, it did for Tottenham.
Yeah, and
I don't see how you can spend $2 billion on a stadium without it affecting the transfer budget. The one thing you'd say is this is a stadium. This is going to be one of the biggest infrastructure projects in British history, and everyone is going to want to be involved with it. And the naming rights for the stadium, let's be honest, when it opens in 5 years is ambitious, but let's say it is 5 years, and it's called the Snapdragon Old Trafford. Snapdragon are going to pay an absolute fortune for that, or whoever happens to be the partner of the month at that time. So they're going to make some money back from that. But yeah, at the time when they're making so many cuts, when things like 40 grand a year for ex-players is being shelved, when Ratcliffe's claiming they're going to go out of business by the end of this year, which I don't think was ever likely, how they then find $2 billion for a stadium, very, very difficult to see at the moment.
Do you not think there's a danger of fans seeing all this happening in the last 6 months, the last 12 months, after such a turbulent 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, and they just think it's not my club anymore? Especially the older listeners who are listening to this podcast. The soul is gradually being stripped back. They're making decisions that clash against what the club's supposed to stand for and who the club is. And fans are going to be forced to walk away. They're probably just going to have enough. Whether that be for financial reasons, and they literally can't afford it, or their own reasons where they think, well, do you know what? It's not my club anymore. And they go to this new stadium and it's double the price, and it's just not going to feel the same.
No, it's not. Maybe some will with the stadium. I mean, it is going to be on the same site. I think a lot obviously walked away with FC United in 2005. Some have gone since. I think so much has happened over the last 20 years that if the fans that are still there now are probably going to stay the same, they might get priced out of it, which is a shame.
It's almost impossible, isn't it? It's so hard to walk away from a football club because it's inside you. It's in your blood.
It is.
Not just something you can choose sometimes to walk away from.
Yeah, when you go in, I've done a lot with FC United, and fair play to those fans who just couldn't stomach the Glazers. Others just felt they couldn't give it up in a way. And it's a weird example, but one of my best mates from uni is from Hereford, and obviously they went bust and the new team started. And he said he just couldn't get behind the new team. He said it wasn't his club. And that shows kind of how the loyalties to the club are inside you. That even though they're playing at the same ground, they've essentially got the same name. Just said it's a different club now, and I don't really feel like it's my club anymore. And that does show how kind of A, it's so hard to give up, and B, your loyalties sometimes are to that club, and you can't.
And that's probably why
it.
they feel they can make these decisions, because it's brutal, but they know, regardless of what they do, they're going to have a huge match-going support.
Yeah.
And from around the world, people are going to fill in those numbers if season tickets do drop as well.
Yeah, they are. And like I say, you could do away with every season ticket holder. They'd still sell out Old Trafford. They'd probably still sell out the new Old Trafford every single week, and they'd make more money from it by having fans who were turning up on a kind of maybe not a one-off basis. There might be some who still go to all 19 games, but there'll be a lot of kind of changing of fans. It won't be the same people sitting together. And I think we're at risk of going down that route. I think a lot of clubs kind of want to pursue that route. I think ticketing is going to get really interesting in the Premier League generally.
It is. You're right. It is a football issue, isn't it? As much as it's United's issue, where you look around the clubs up and down the country. Other clubs who have announced their season ticket price rises, they're facing backlash, and it's impressive to see supporters coming together before games when they're playing each other and looking at the common enemy and kind of coming and joining for good. And that's really important because it affects everyone. You have to put rivalries aside at that point to kind of work toward a common goal. Yeah,
you do. And the Football Supporters Association have done some great work on this. That Stop Exploiting Loyalty banner has been seen. I did both City Liverpool games this year, and the supporters of both teams held it up and protested pre-match. It was at United, Fulham, I think, recently. I mean, the FA Cup's a prime example. United have charged Fulham and Leicester, I don't know if there was anyone else, but certainly Fulham and Leicester, more than £50 for away tickets for the FA Cup.
That's a disgrace.
It is a disgrace. Premier League tickets are capped at £30, and those clubs would be entitled to, I think it's about 9,000, just over 9,000 tickets at an FA Cup game at Old Trafford. I think they both bought 1,000, 1,500, because tickets are more than £50. They're capped at £30 for a Premier League away game. As soon as it's not a Premier League away game, United are like, right, we'll fleece these
But
buggers.
even in a business sense, I mean, your bigger clubs would probably bring the following. But in terms of those clubs, for example, Fulham and Leicester, if you charge 20 is plenty, you're probably going to get a huge following, and you will fill out that way. And they could say you don't want to follow in, but from a business sense, you would actually make more money doing that.
Well, the thing is,
more.
Yeah, they didn't sell out the way end, but those tickets weren't left. Those seats weren't left empty. They were sold to home fans, and I bet they weren't sold to home fans for £30. I bet they were sold to home fans for £50, £60, and United are making more money from it. But it is terrible. Fulham and Leicester fan groups and supporters trusts issued statements about that and protested about that, and I think it's.
But it comes back to United's fans, because if you're charging that for away fans to come to your ground, why should clubs give you a reasonable price when United fans?
I mean, if United draw Leicester or Fulham away in the FA Cup next year, they should be charged £50 again, and the blame should be placed squarely at Manchester United. And the FA Cup, especially in the fourth and fifth round, it is not the competition it used to be. It is not a competition where you're paying £50 for a fourth round game, and that was the third time in 3 months Leicester had been to Old Trafford after the Premier League and Carabao Cup. It was a joke of a decision, and it shows what this United regime think of supporters, and it is that they are not supporters, that they are customers that can happily be replaced. Totally, it's contempt.
It will be fascinating to see if we see something similar to the Super League backlash, because that was the first time ever where the country truly stood up and showed the power was among the people. And it's a very cliche statement, isn't it? Yeah. But it was, and it was so powerful that, and everyone came out on the streets, thousands of people, protests around the country, and they made it go away. And they thought they could push that through, and everyone rose against it.
Yeah.
Will it get to that point with ticket prices? It is starting to feel like gradually the anger is going to hit boiling point really with this.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully. The problem is not everyone's in the same boat. I think you mentioned the clubs that have frozen tickets before there. I mean, like I say, Liverpool fans have protested with City, so I'm sure they would. Is it Brentford that have frozen their prices? I don't know how much anger there is about prices there. So not every club is in the same boat, but it is becoming a big issue. And like I say, a lot of football fans who've been going for years are being priced out of this, and you can see it clearly that fans are just not being treated as fans anymore. It's almost not a case that loyalty is being exploited, because they don't care if you've been going for 30 years or not. They don't care if you renew or not. That's the horrible reality of it. They're not exploiting your loyalty. They're exploiting everyone's loyalty in a way. And that, you've been going for 30 years. Your ticket's now going up another 5%. You can't afford to go. That's a shame. Sorry, mate. We'll sell your seat to someone else. Well, they're not bothered who's in that seat.
We talked about the weirdest interviews we'd done on this podcast a few weeks ago on one of the early episodes. And I said I just interviewed United's quote-unquote number one fan, Eddie Thomas. And a couple of seasons ago, the reason I was introduced to him was because he had a ticketing disagreement with the club. He'd missed his deadline by 24 hours. He was a very elderly man. And they just said, look, nothing we can do. He'd been to every game since 1966. Been to every final, including Europeans, since then. Incredible support.
Yeah.
You don't get people like that. I mean, how many people, probably a couple, maybe a handful have done that among United fans. And they just said nothing we could do. And he said to me when I went to his house recently, he said, they just don't care.
No, they don't.
It's realising that you have to kind of accept it. They just don't care, unfortunately.
They don't.
And United aren't the only club like that. It's the vehicle of travel, isn't it, in the Premier League? That is just football now.
Yeah, it does seem to be the way that it's going. Like I say, United and City fans should probably, the derby's the next home fixture at Old Trafford. United and City fans should be doing something together. I know it's hard to get them aligned on issues, but ticketing is a major, major issue at City. I don't think their prices have been announced yet, but it was 5% last year, which went down terribly. Ticket prices have gone up a lot at the Etihad. Like I say, when season tickets are given up at the Etihad, they're not being replaced by new season tickets. I think there's an angle there for both clubs to really do something together, because it is a big talking point across football in the Premier League, but it's a big, big talking point in Manchester especially, I think.
Anyways, ignore all that bad news, because under 16 prices have been frozen.
Yeah. That sounded like something that the fan advisory board had got a win on. I don't think they got many wins.
It's just brutal at the moment. It's so tough, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really
is. It is. And I don't think, there's a lot of NDAs and stuff around the fan advisory board, but reading between the lines, I think just a 5% increase is probably a victory for them. I think United wanted higher, and I think over the next few years, you're probably going to see them push for higher rises.
We'll leave it there then for part one. We'll be back in a moment for part two. Welcome back to part two of the podcast. We're just going to have a relaxed chat as usual, Ty. You feeling relaxed?
I'm feeling very relaxed, Stephen. It's like a therapist couch. This. Well, you're on the therapist couch, actually. Yeah. I'm the therapist.
If you're not watching on YouTube, which you shouldn't be, because me and Ty aren't that good looking, you should be listening on Spotify or Apple. They've changed seats, so I'm on a sofa now.
Yeah, I know, you are.
Good space for a guest.
Maybe quite a low sofa. I'm towering above you, which is kind of normal when we stood up, to be fair, Stephen.
You're 5'11", I'm 6 foot, so you're not usually.
6 foot?
Right, anyways, there's been football. It's now the international break. United won against Leicester on Sunday evening. I was still off and recovering from my exertions. You were at the King Power with Samuel. What a performance. That's what it should be like, shouldn't it? I know it's only Leicester, and to be fair, they are abysmal. They've actually probably got even worse since Van Nistelrooy arrived, maybe. I'm surprised he's made it this long, and I'll be surprised
I don't think he'll be in charge next
season. Yeah. But the positivity feels like it's back. It's amazing, isn't it? 2 wins back to back, and everyone's starting to look up a bit.
It is, yeah. And since United released those mocked up images of a new Old Trafford and had 3-0 on the scoreboard, they've won successive games by 3 goals. So, maybe they were onto something. They normally lose home games 3-0, but they've won by 3 against Real Sociedad, and they won by 3 away at Leicester, and 3 defeats in 17. Yeah, it does seem that things are picking up. And normally, United have made a habit of kind of, we always want them to win because it's easier for our job when they win, but there's sometimes where you're like, right, we really need you to win this time.
Sociedad was
massive, because the season would have been dead for us 2 months out, and next season would be pretty dead for us as well without Europe.
When we say dead, I mean, who wants to read about the club when there's nothing to play for?
Well, there'd have been 11 dead rubber Premier League games left, essentially. At least, the Sociedad keeps the season alive for another month at least, and the manner of the performance and European performances makes you think they can go all the way. Fulham's a classic example. Fulham at home. I went into that game. I remember talking to our boss, and he was saying, like, are you ready for what's to come? And I said, yeah, United won, Fulham win on penalties. And it turned out to be very accurate. But that was another day where
that was a better bet than Constitution.
It was a better bet than Constitution, yeah. And yeah, you needed them to win that game to keep the season going, and they didn't win. So it's nice, going to an international break that they win. And I'd back them in this league I do, where you've got to pick every team to win twice.
Last man standing.
Kind of like a last man standing, but it goes on. Everyone's in it for the whole season. The last 2 game weeks are double, so there's 40 selections, and you've got to pick every team twice. And it was a cup game for me as well, so I picked United, and they did the business. So I was impressed. But yeah, a good performance and a bit of positivity, which is why it was absolutely inevitable that season ticket prices were going to come out on Monday.
Well, I said that to our boss as well. I said they'll be waiting for 2 back-to-back results.
Yeah.
And then they'll release the season ticket prices. I mean, that was just an all-time certainty.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to someone at the club we were talking about what to expect with the international break, and I said, ticket prices, and he was like, that'll be your next story. And the other reason is that there's 3 weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks until the next game at Old Trafford. and that game is City, when a lot of fans probably won't want to protest. There might be, different narratives going on at that point. So it is kind of the perfect time to not bury bad news because there's nothing else happening, but to put bad news out and then hope everyone forgets about it in 3 weeks.
It's almost like they're paid to make these decisions.
Yeah.
Comms and PR and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Jim
quite-
Ratcliffe should take some advice from them every now and again when he does interviews.
Aidan Heaven's been a really bright spark in the last few weeks. He obviously joined the club from Arsenal in the January window. It was sold to us as a first-team signing, and I think my eyebrows slightly raised when I got that message because I thought, hang on a minute, 18 years old. He's played one game for Arsenal. Necessarily didn't stand out as a first-team addition, but he has looked really good, hasn't he? And fair play to the lad. I mean, he comes on it was a half-time against Arsenal, comes on from the bench against Sociedad as well. Starts against Leicester. Fantastic performances.
Yeah. And he was really good in the first half.
He the starting role, didn't he?
At Leicester. Yeah. He was really good in the first half again. One big block, a couple of really good defensive contributions, looks comfortable on the ball. Just over £1 million. I mean, a great signing. I was talking to someone at half-time at United and said I don't know if the plan would have been to send him out on loan next season, but obviously he had no real senior experience at all when he joined the club. But now, I think he's fifth choice centre-half next year. You can let Evans and Lindelof go, and you don't need to sign another central defender this summer. I think Evans...
We had this debate the other week.
I
was trying to just remember what I said.
Yeah.
I'm probably too hungover still to recall.
Yeah. Heaven is your fifth choice, and with Mazraoui and Shaw as cover, you don't need another when you've got so much more to spend on now. But it was... I was going to say it's quite funny, that's not really the right word, but we were talking about him at half-time, and we were like, is he in an England squad? And I think he was on standby for the under-19s, but one of our colleagues was basically offering anyone that would have it a bet that he would be in Tuchel's squad in June when there's a few withdrawals. He was like, he'll be in the senior squad in June.
Can you name that
anyone?
colleague?
I won't name the colleague, no.
Was it Peachy?
It wasn't Peachy, no. He might have taken the bet, though. I think he was after his money 5 minutes later. So we're having this conversation like he's doing brilliantly. Someone's there saying he's going to be in the senior England squad by June. He's definitely going to be in the senior England squad by June. Get back up to our seats. A couple were late getting in. Who's that down? Aidan Heaven. Yeah.
Cash
So
out.
it's not going to be... Doesn't look like he's going to be in England squad in June now. So, yeah, really, a horrible, unfortunate moment for him. You could see it was serious straight away.
It was weird though, wasn't it? Because it was an innocuous challenge. It didn't look serious the way he went down. And then he comes off on a stretcher and you think, bloody hell, and lengthy medical
Well, when he
attention.
went down, the press box at Leicester is kind of slightly beyond the halfway line to the other side from where that happened. But you saw it happen. And I saw it happen and looked away and went to my laptop and just kind of carried on with what I was doing. And it was only maybe a minute later that I see he's still down, signalling for treatment. And it's like, oh, and you didn't really see anything happen. But yeah, it was obvious. Obviously, a lot of his teammates were worried for him. And maybe that was, I think, Amorim said after the game he couldn't speak. So maybe the pain or whatever.
He does make me laugh, Amorim, with some of the quotes. I mean, he's brilliant for us, but he's quite dramatic, isn't he?
He's a
bit of a drama
line
queen
of like
sometimes.
he couldn't speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe he was doing the Castleford "I can't speak" commentary when he was down. Although I don't think he didn't look in the mood for jokes, to be fair, when he was down getting treatment. But you could see his teammates were worried, and maybe that was why. But I was amazed. So I did the mix zone afterwards, and a good mix zone at Leicester, and you see the players walk from the tunnel to the bus. So I was there chatting to Andy Mitten, and most of the players had gone. Then suddenly Heaven walks past us in a protective boot, and it was like, oh, it was quite surprising because you look at him being stretchered off and the treatment he'd had, and you're thinking he's probably going to go to,
Do you know what
to
happened?
hospital.
It was an intervention from God.
Is that what it was?
For Heaven.
Heaven sent.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, There's going to be a lot of those ponds over the next few years, isn't there?
But you're right. I'm not sure. I asked this morning. We've been told they're still assessing. And he posted on social media last night, I'm doing really well and recovering fast. It doesn't, thankfully, it doesn't seem, won't count my chickens yet, but it doesn't seem as serious as it might have been. Hopefully not anyways.
Yeah, hopefully not. Like I say, I mean, when you see him go down and you hear the Sky Aren't showing replays, his leg's kind of strapped when he goes off. You're thinking broken ankle, broken leg. I thought it was maybe knee at first, but you're kind of thinking, is he going to, if it's a broken leg, is he going straight to hospital? And then he walks out in his protective boot, and I think one of the medical team were carrying crutches, but he wasn't using
It was
them.
around his foot, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was on his right foot, the boot.
Was
so
he
I think
holding his leg, or could it be a metatarsal?
It was
'Cause when you-
ankle. I don't know if it would have been metatarsal. I mean, I don't know if the pain's that bad for
Yeah.
metatarsal. I mean, we wait and see what it
we'll
is,
wait
and
and
maybe he is only 18, and he obviously felt it was serious at the time. But maybe it was something that was painful, that is not as bad as first feared. Because when you see it, you're thinking that's 6 months, 9 months. So we wait and see. But the fact he walked out and didn't need to use the crutches, and like I say, he had a protective boot on his right foot and lower leg, but.
You were saying foot there as you tapped your calf.
To tap my calf. I can't reach down to me.
It's what happens when you get to that age.
31 now, Stephen. I can't reach down to me. To
Maybe
me foot.
30 years ago. You spoke to Rasmus Højlund in the mixer, and he's been pretty tight-lipped this season. Understandably, he wasn't in the mood to speak at Goodison Park. He gives a pretty blunt response. Was it a 21 game? Was it 22? 21?
I think it was 21 in the end. He scored in his 22nd,
goal
maybe.
Drought. It's just been really, really disappointing for Højlund this season. He's made huge backward steps. But you wouldn't have thought it when you watched that goal at the King Power.
Yeah,
he took that goal like a striker in really good form.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, isn't it, what confidence does in elite sport. I mean, strikers, particularly quite streaky creatures, and once they score, they'll go on a run. And you think back to Boxing Day in 2023 when he scored his first Premier League goal against Aston Villa. Great moment. And he went on a superb run of form, a real purple patch. Can he do it now? He needs to do it now. He needs to end this season really strongly, because there's been a lot of questions and scrutiny around Højlund this season.
Yeah, there has. And, I don't think he'll be the starting striker next season, but he does have his attributes. He has the game, I think, for what Amorim wants in that system. And he kind of said that towards the end. That, you saw it with Gyökeres at Sporting. He wants me to stretch the play and make runs in the channel and play on the last man. And Højlund can do that. He's got a lot of pace, but it has been a really difficult season for him. He took the goal really, really well. Fair play to him. And when he scored it, we were sat next to a couple of United staffers in the press box, and one of them celebrated banging the press next table. And they're kind of normally very emotionless watching games, but it was an insight, I think, into what people there think of Højlund, that he is quite popular. He's clearly quite well liked, and there was clearly a desire among everyone for him to end this goal drought. I think the fact he took it really well shows that I've never really had a doubt about his finishing, to be honest. I've never really felt that that's a weakness in his game.
I don't think he finishes as well as that. I think that's the kind of finish that you want to see from your striker. Not thinking about it, just hit it.
Yeah.
And very convincing. He doesn't often finish like that, I don't think.
I don't know, I disagree. I think he outperformed his XG last season. This year, he's gone 21. So I basically did my piece for the morning at Leicester about how not all goal droughts are equal. And Højlund had gone 21 games without scoring. He'd had 21 shots in that time. Garnacho had gone 24 games without scoring and had more than 50 shots. And Højlund's 21 shots amounted to a nod to Samuel here, because I know he loves expected goals. I hope he's listening on his week off.
Should we call it the Expected Goals podcast?
Expected Goals podcast, yeah.
We don't love expected goals, but we like them, and they've got value in the right place.
I think it adds something to the narrative if you use them in the right time. And I think this is a moment where it adds something to it. So do stay listening, Samuel, if you're listening to this on your week off. His 21 games, 21 shots, an XG of 2.5, which is really low. I don't think you really blame Højlund for that. I think you blame a lack of service. But also, not scoring with an XG of 2.5, it's not ideal, but it's still very low. There's lots of strikers who will not score across a run of 2.5 XG, but they'll probably do that over 3 games rather than 21.
I'd agree, but I'd counter that point by it's a low XG to have, which obviously hasn't had those chances. But having a high XG and having more chances, that's on you as well to an extent. Obviously, the service is the most important factor.
Yeah.
But getting yourself into those positions, Højlund probably hasn't done enough of this season.
Yeah, maybe.
Is it maybe 70-30, for example? 70% on the team and 30% on
I think maybe a little bit more, to be honest. I mean, you see him in those positions an awful lot. I think for a long time, until recently, the ball is never in those positions.
He often doesn't shoot though, Ty. And we've talked about this around the box where you watch top strikers, Ollie Watkins, Alexander Isaac, for example. They're around the box and they'll shoot and they'll create a yard of space. He rarely creates a yard of space and has a shot. He never really creates a chance for himself.
That's probably fair, but he's playing a very defined role under Amorim, I think. And I don't know, I think more of it comes down to the service. The classic one, Sociedad, where Dalot just didn't pass to him when it was on. Abysmal, yeah. And I put that stat, I think it's before Fulham maybe, they put the Garnacho and Højlund stat on Twitter and said, I think at the time it was like Højlund had 16 shots and Garnacho 46 in their goal drought. And someone replied, and I thought it was a really interesting point actually, and said the latter stat has got a lot to do with the first. Garnacho's having that many shots because he never passes, and he takes some shots that are just not scoring opportunities on. And he's a really dangerous player, but I think there's been many a time where he should have passed to Højlund and didn't. But Amorim strikers tend to score from bang in front of the goal. He wants the wing-backs to get wide or the attacking midfielders to play through balls. He doesn't want his strikers shooting from 25 yards out, I don't think. He wants them teed up with good chances in the box.
Gokares's highlights, I mean, he still scores those goals. So he was still popping up in certain areas. He wasn't just a fox in the box at Sporting Lisbon.
I don't know. I think I think
it'd be interesting to look at the breakdown.
Is.
It would be all his goals. It would be like a heat map to see what it was.
I think he stays very central. He'll make those channel runs to give you an out ball, but generally when attacks are building up and Sporting are in possession, I think he tends to stay pretty central. And, I said it to you last week, and I said it against people on Sunday. You put Gokares in that team for those 21 games, and how many does he score? I'm saying 3, 4 maximum.
I'd say more than that, but I wouldn't say more than 10.
But how's he getting chances that Højlund isn't?
Better instincts and better position, I think. And
possibly, but the ball,
that's
until recently...
That's where Højlund's lacked, and his build-up players let him down as well, and that brings your teammates around the box and creates chances for yourself.
I think the problem recently is the ball isn't near the box. Until recently, this team has been passing the ball from defence to midfield to a wing-back, back to the defence. Like, Højlund can't do anything there. The ball is so... And there are signs it's starting to click now, which I think is why Højlund had a good few chances against Sociedad and looked a lot better. And the same against Leicester. The signs are starting to click. But for a lot of games, they've been really dull to watch. And the ball is never near the number 9. The ball goes to Dallo at wing-back, and there's no option, and he goes back to his centre-back. And it goes to Mazraoui at wing-back, and there's no option, and he goes back to his centre-back. There's not a lot Højlund can do about that.
I put him in the fantasy team ahead of the Leicester game, because I did think he'd score. There were promising signs against Sociedad, weren't there? I'd be of the opinion that, yes, it's more of this lack of service, obviously, than Højlund himself. But yeah, probably 70-30 for me. And you'd be what? 90-10?
No, maybe
80-20?
71-29. So maybe 75-25.
So considering that debate, we're not too far apart from where we think the blame
We're
lies.
not. But I think there's an argument there. And I put that to him when we spoke to him in the mix zone and said, put the shot stat to him and said, is it a case that, it's a long goal drought, but it kind of lacked the service as well. And he owned it basically and said, I need to do more.
That's why I wanted to talk about it, especially because it's so refreshing and you've got a lot of respect for players who front up and kind of take accountability.
Yeah.
And it's worth reading if you go look at the piece. Ty spoke to Højlund in the mix zone. Sometimes mix zone quotes aren't the best, but I thought it was a decent piece. He gave you some good value. And he just said, I need to work on things. I've not been good enough and I've not been at my best.
Yeah. Which is, I don't think anyone doubts that. And the reality is, United overpaid for him. Everyone could have told you when they paid 72 million, they have overpaid for him. And I'll always remember when it came to they'd signed him, we were in I think it was UCLA in San Diego, where United were training. And that day we were having the round table, the sit down with Amorim. And I think we were flying to Vegas that night. But
Amorim?
Not with Amorim, with Ten Hag. Yeah, fair play. We haven't had one with Amorim yet. With Ten Hag, yeah. God, it was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? And I mean, a few days ago, United had been saying there's no way we're paying over 60. Then it's like, we've agreed a deal for him, 64, rising to 72. And everyone who was there said it's too much. And I remember we had the discussion and we said, what's a good season for Højlund? And we said probably 15 goals, which he got 16. And I think everyone thinks he had a good first season. But it's not enough for United. It's enough for Højlund coming into that team as such a callow striker. But it was never going to be enough for United.
I mean, we've spoken about this so much, but two things can be true, isn't it? And we said that at the time. Yes, that was a great season for Højlund, a very good first year. But yeah, it wasn't enough for United. But they were the ones who accepted that situation and signed him. They should have signed a more experienced striker.
They should have signed a more experienced striker.
How many times have we said that on this podcast?
Or not been fleeced so easily by Atalanta.
Yeah.
As soon as Atalanta go, PSG have called us as well. It's like, right, get to Atalanta. United agreed a deal at, I think it was 2-3 a.m. in the morning, 2-3 a.m. with Atlanta. And yeah, you go, credit to them for holding those talks, but they kind of panicked into it. They were easy to play in that era. They were panicked into it.
PSG were interested, weren't they? Which drove up the price.
PSG were interested, but they're never going to pay that price.
No.
And he's not a £72 million striker. I think next year, if they sign another number 9, I think he's very good competition for someone, but he shouldn't be the starting number 9.
That's why I think it's bonkers when we were talking about potentially signing Liam Delap. And if Liam Delap for 40-50 million, that's absurd to me. Because you're just doing the same thing again. You're making the same mistake again. You're signing potential.
Think that's
for a really big fee.
Yeah, but it's 25 million cheaper, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's still a lot of money.
Yeah. I still think
it's still too much.
I think Delap and Højlund. I mean, you'd like to think one of them would come good. But yeah, you're right that ideally you want
they've got to have an experienced
25 goal a season striker.
If they don't sign that experienced striker, I'd just be banging my head against the wall again, because I think you're just asking for trouble again.
Yeah.
You're not learning from your mistakes.
Yeah. Thing is, I think that the time has passed to sign an experienced striker. I mean, Harry Kane was the one. They bottled it. Didn't.
There's someone out there. There's a few heads out
I mean, Osserman is one.
He's my leading candidate. I think he's the one I'd like to see.
Yeah, I don't know. Still not massively convinced.
What did Victor Osserman do to you? Did he upset you?
He's had 2 good seasons in his life.
More than that.
I don't think he has.
His
Look him
overall,
up. Look him up.
his overall
You've
goal
got a laptop
scoring
in front of
record.
you. Look
His
him up.
overall goal scoring record is actually very good. I had my doubts, but then he had that off season at Napoli.
Yeah.
Everyone's entitled to an off season, and they finished in the bottom half.
Yeah.
He's then went to Galatasaray this season. He's proven his quality. He's played in the Champions League.
He's scored a lot of goals for Galatasaray, but
Yeah.
they've got a much better squad than anyone else in Turkey. And
This season, he's got 26 goals in 30 appearances.
that's good for Galatasaray.
And his overall record is 140 goals in 253 appearances.
Yeah,
That is incredible.
I wouldn't say it's incredible.
It is. That's
but
a
it's
very,
good.
very good record.
It's a good record.
For players who are attainable right now in the
Let me
market.
have a look.
He doesn't believe it.
I do believe
for players
you,
who are attainable in the market right now, he is the best choice.
Yeah, I think he probably is, yeah.
And Conte fell out with Romelu Lukaku. Sorry, fell out with Osherman. Didn't want them. Got Lukaku in. Lukaku's been his striker at Napoli. So Napoli are going to sell Osherman this summer. It's
Yeah,
just a matter of
they are.
which club.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't think he was great at Lille, and then his first season at Napoli I don't think was great. He obviously came good, but the Galatasaray season, I don't know, I'm not keen to read too much into that. I think it's just shooting fish in a barrel, scoring goals in the Turkish league when you're playing for Galatasaray.
Well, Højlund couldn't go to Turkey and score 26 goals in 30 appearances.
No, he probably couldn't. He'd still get 20 probably.
I disagree.
But yeah, I think he'd probably be decent. I'm just not sure they can afford him.
Moving on, it's the international break. Unfortunately, 2 weeks of very boring, drab football. United do have a player in the England squad who's currently on loan at Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Marcus Rashford, of course. I think, to be fair, Manchester City have just looking. Just Phil Foden.
And Kyle Walker.
And Kyle Walker back in, has he?
Yeah.
Has he been recalled?
Jordan Anderson. All the old boys get the band
Interesting
back
selections
together.
from Thomas Tuchel. If Gareth Southgate had made those selections, he'd be heavily criticised.
He would, yes. Short-term manager pick short-term squad.
Yeah. Look, it's good for Rashford though, isn't it? I mean, as a person, but more importantly for United as a club, because he's went to Aston Villa, he started to pick up a bit. It's interesting when you watch him because he just looks more interested, doesn't he? And that's damning.
Yeah, he's just working harder, isn't
Yeah, and that increases his market value going into the summer, although you'd expect Aston Villa would trigger their option to buy, wouldn't you, at this stage? I think they will.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, he hasn't scored yet. I think it's 9 games now without a goal. I think he's got 3 assists maybe. He looks a lot livelier. I still think he probably needs to do a bit more to make sure they trigger it. But yeah, if you want to sell him, so him and Anthony doing well is good in terms of selling them. It's not a good look that players are leaving United on loan and suddenly looking good again.
What do you think the chances are then? So I do think Villa will trigger it. I mean, it's all theoretical at this stage, isn't it? But do you think it's more likely than not?
What, that they'll trigger it?
Yeah.
I think
they will.
50-50 at the moment.
I think they're the fans are loving them, to be fair, from what I've seen. Chanting his name away in Belgium the other week.
I just think there's a lot of this season left. And we've seen with Rashford how quickly things can go south. So I think there's still a lot that can happen to either turn that into a solid yes or a solid no.
We'll come back to this prediction.
So.
And then Anthony as well. He's obviously the other candidate who's on loan who will leave in the summer. He's having a brilliant time at Real Betis.
Yeah.
The worst Premier League signing of all time, in my opinion, is having a stormer in La Liga. His quotes from his agent were interesting the other week. I just laugh when I see stuff like that because suggesting that the United were ultimately responsible for his decline at the club. I mean, come on, he was absolutely abysmal in Manchester. It was shocking.
Yeah, he was terrible. There's no doubt about it. But it's an easy accusation to make because he's hardly the only player who's been terrible at United and then has looked good as soon as he goes somewhere else. So I think it's a pretty easy accusation to make. But yeah, he was totally, again, United totally overpaid for him. He's a one-dimensional player and he just offered nothing. He was miles out of his depth.
He did provide us
United.
with the hand tourney, didn't he? That was your face. I mean, if Samuel's listening, Samuel was trying to do the Antonio five-a-side because Anthony was his
Is
favourite
that why
player,
he's
wasn't he,
off?
for the first season? Yeah, he picked up an injury. But those two need to go out the door, don't they, Ty, in the summer straight away as priority exits.
Yeah, neither have got any hope, I don't think, of getting back into the picture. So yeah, I think they both need to go and raise a bit of cash.
Anything else? I can't even speak. Anything else to add on the international break?
No, just
England playing on Friday.
really
I think is it Albania?
Yeah, they're really dull games, aren't they? Albania on Friday.
Doesn't do much for me. I'm not really
Then
bothered.
someone else. I was looking at our Welsh producer. Then he's going to know, is he?
Don't think he's going to help.
Not
you
sure
out.
he's still there.
Yeah.
Gone. There he is. Yeah, I don't know. It's someone else really boring at home, isn't it? On Monday, I think. So yeah, they're just a nightmare, these international breaks.
And then
aren't
is it Nottingham Forest, on April the 1st for United when they resume?
they? Yeah. So
Yep,
it's
away at the City Ground. Who
two weekends without a game.
Well, I mean, we'll probably have to discuss that a bit more next week's podcast to give ourselves something to talk about.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it till
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Ty. It's good to be back.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Good to see you, and glad you've got your coat.
I was going to say I'm off
not
to,
your shoes.
off to find my shoes.
Nice
now.
socks, though.
Thanks to listeners, as usual. Leave us a like and a comment on YouTube or subscribe if you're on Apple and Spotify. Have a great week. Take care.